we move our attention now from Cape Town to Port Louis in Mauritius to discuss corporate governance in that particular country. And that's with Clairette, Ah-Hen, Chief Executive of Financial Services Commission in Mauritius. Thank you so much for joining us today. Perhaps if we take a look at the corporate governance landscape in Mauritius, what would you rate it as? Clairette, I'm not too sure if you can hear me, but taking a look at the corporate governance landscape in Mauritius, how would you describe it as?
Well, what I would say is that in Mauritius, we've done all the various initiatives that's required in order to ensure that we demonstrate that we have good governance in Mauritius. The important thing is that without good governance, you can't have the economic development that we are expecting. And therefore, in Mauritius, we've made sure that we deal with the various aspects of governance, basically at the political level, the economic level, as well as the institutional level. So I think it's essential for the economic development.
Now, Mauritius is in a very unique position on the Indian Ocean. How do you merge your corporate governance strategies with that of the international community, both on the east and west?
Well, one of the things that we have to remember, if we are thinking about global investors, you have to adopt standards that is understood by all parties globally, and therefore that it adheres to norms and standards that's clearly understood by all investors. In that particular regard, when we started looking at the corporate governance landscape in Mauritius, we thought what best way to start with a World Bank assessment. This World Bank assessment is based on OECD principles, which is understood by all investors. And in that regard, we started instituting our code for corporate governance, as well as putting the right framework to ensure implementation.
That framework, is it based on your experience in the international community after you've been so well-traveled?
Well, what we would find is that we started thinking about the corporate governance back in 2001, and we issued the code in 2004. I think it has brought a lot of improvement in the landscape. However, we do realize that we've also had to face the financial crisis, and therefore we have to continuously update the code so that it reflects the various business practices. Some of the lessons that we've learned from the financial crisis has been that boards and all the other stakeholders must pay particular attention to risk management. And in that particular aspect, we are bringing further revision to ensure that all boards are concerned about how they implement their risk management perspectives to ensure that you have sustainable growth in the economy.
Well, maybe that's an important point that you mentioned, because you yourself have studied accounting. You head up the FSC and have a very strong economic background. Are you going to instill your focus on financial services firms first?
Well, in terms of risk management, because without capital flows, we won't expect to have the economic growth that we are expecting. So therefore, our focus is on financial services firm, because at the end of the day, this is where the pensioners, investors are first get into the economic landscape. So at the FSC, this is the Financial Services Commission for non-banking financial institutes. So what we are doing, we are ensuring that the directors pay particular attention to risk management perspective. And also they take into account the needs of investors and policyholders.
But I'm sure this doesn't come without its challenges, Clairette.
Yes, a lot. What we have also to take into account is how do you implement it? The fact that we don't have one model that fits all, we also have to rely on various principles. But sometimes we cannot just rely on principles. The regulator must come forward with various codes, circulars, to show what is expected and how these can be implemented. What we've seen over the last 10 years is not just saying what the code should be. It's very important that we demonstrate how it's being implemented. I think when we combine a good code with the right implementation and as well as monitoring and enforcement, then that would be the right remedy for stakeholders to have confidence in the system.
Clairette, just to close off with the improved corporate governance environment in Mauritius, can you quantify the impact it might have on foreign direct investment into that country?
What we've seen is that, especially during the last financial services, last financial crisis, is that Mauritius have been resilient to that. While we were preparing that we might have an outflow, what we found is that Mauritius has provided the security, the credibility and stability that many investors looked for. In addition, what we've also found is that it's essential that the regulators understand the needs of stakeholders in order to ensure that in the long run, all investors remain in Mauritius as a safe place to do business.